Hi, I'm Kristen. I want to show you today the latest quilt that I've made. It's for a friend's wedding. So it's just sort of a scrappy improv modern quilt, but I'm going to talk you through how I put it together to kind of give you a starting point. So it's similar in a way, in sort of how I approached it, to a denim improv quilt that I have a video about. So I'll link that. That's maybe slightly simpler to put together, that one. But this one is simple too. The quilt top took me 2 or 3 evenings, and the quilting took me longer. Usually it's the other way around for me. The quilt top takes longer, and it's not like the quilting is super intricate or something. I'll show you that in the video as well. But what I started with was a Ruby Star scrap bag. So this isn't the scrap bag that Moda sells with the long strips. This is a fabric store in my area, just sells off little bits, I guess, after they've chopped things up to sell. So these are various sizes. I think I measured the largest was like 5x7, and then it goes down to like 3x4. These are just the ones that didn't make the cut for this quilt because the coloring wasn't quite what I was going for. So I'll show you all of that, how it came together. The background was all fabric remnant, mostly fabric remnants, the larger pieces, and then there's some other smaller scraps. If you don't know what a remnant is or a bolt end, then do see my video 9 ways to buy cheap quilting fabric, and I'll explain it all in there. So let me show you how I put the quilt together. So I knew I wanted to make my friend a modern quilt, but I also knew it had to be quick. So what I started with was laying out some low volume, larger pieces, sort of remnants and scraps. It was basically 2 big pieces. And then on top of that, I just randomly placed some of these Ruby Star scraps, as well as some sort of, I guess you call them orphan blocks. Some of the flying geese that I do to use up scraps. I like the kind of teal color in that one, and I had another scrap of that teal, so I thought I could put it in somewhere else at some point. And it just seemed to go with some of the colors of the rest of the scraps. So it wasn't that this is where all of those scraps or blocks were going to end up being. This was more a kind of concept stage and kind of going, how would that look if there was just some scraps randomly in a rough, different kind of arrangement, and how did the colors look together? So that's what I was doing at that point. To start turning these scraps into blocks of a type, what I did was got some low volume sort of strips. So some of them were jelly roll strips, some of them were just left over from other things. And I started chain piecing the Ruby Star scraps as well as the flying geese blocks on top of these. So I just kept going and going. So I'm just trying to add this low volume color to one side. So it doesn't matter if it's the long side or the short side. I was just grabbing them and basically putting them wherever they fit on the strip. Then obviously I'm trimming them apart because they were chain pieced. And then I'm going to need to iron them and trim them again. So so I pressed them as quickly as I could in a bundle. And then you can see that they're not even, they're not straight. We're not worrying about that. We're just getting the seams as flat as we can. And then we're going to trim along one side. So obviously you could trim all the way around. You could make these a set size, but I was just giving myself another straight edge to add some more fabric on at the next stage. So you can be as precise or not precise with this as you want. You can make them wonky, but basically just you need another straight edge to sew onto. So next, I got some, I think this was the remnant that was on the bottom in the kind of design picture there. And I'm really just cutting it randomly. I haven't pressed it. I'm cutting it on the fold lines as it came to me. I don't even know what size this fabric was. So it's just any kind of size that's going to be long enough to cover the joined side of the pieces we've just made, if that makes sense. And longer is fine. So you can see in the next step, I'm going to, again, chain piece and add more than one at a time. So there's my kind of longer-ish, thicker-ish strips. They can be any size you want. And then I'm just adding, so I'm crossing the seam that I made the first time when I was adding the scraps to the jelly roll. So for some of them, actually. So for some of them, yeah, I'll be doing that. And then for some, I'm not sure if it's in this clip or not, Yeah, so I might turn it the other way, and I'm actually adding white to the bottom and the top rather than the side. So it's just about, we eventually want to surround the scraps with our background color, which for me is just the like low volume in general. So it's not the same fabric all the way around, but you could use the same fabric. Literally whatever side you can fit, just to make the chain piecing go as quickly as you can. That's the one to add. So there I'm adding the low volume to the bottom rather than to the seam that I already sewed the last time. And then of course we have to trim them again apart so that they're separate pieces. And then we need to press them again as well. This time when I went to trim, I trimmed, I think, all the sides, or at least all the sides that looked like there was something hanging over, it's not straight, or there were more selvages here, because when I just randomly cut my big hunks of low volume fabric, I didn't bother with the selvage edges or anything. So this is the point where I removed them so that the next time I go to sew on a piece, I don't have to worry about them. So again, I'm not being super precise. They're not all the same size at this point, and they're not going to be the same size at any point. And then this is me hacking up a bigger bit of fabric. It seems large for a bolt end or a remnant, but I can't remember where I bought it. It's an art gallery fabric print. It's really nice. So I don't know, maybe it was in a sale or something, but it was, I don't know how big it was, but I'm going to say it was less than a meter, which is how they measure it here in the UK. Less than a yard. I'm not really sure. But again, I'm just cutting it randomly, but these are much bigger pieces now than the sections before. So you can see for scale here, and I'm doing the same thing again. I'm chain piecing along another side. So a third side of the scrap is now covered with some sort of low volume fabric. So the rest of the steps are pretty much the same as before. So I will speed it up for you a bit and come back and tell you what we do after this. Then have these units or blocks of the scrap with your background fabric on three sides, and it's then a kind of jigsaw puzzle operation of trying to fit them together. So trying to combine these smaller units into larger units like this one. So this one's got, I think, 5 plus another scrap, just to try and make it the right size. When I say the right length, I mean it fits on a straight edge to something else. I don't mean I'm measuring it to a particular size. So I just keep making these sort of units or larger blocks, whatever you want to call them, and building it up and laying them out. Where would it look nice? Moving it around. What would I need to put up against it to make that one match that? So you can see the kind of holes and the gaps. So for those, I need to make smaller, sometimes skinnier units. So I'll be using the scraps that got cut off at the other stages. If you got left off with like a little square or rectangle of the low volume or your background fabric. And then I was just laying out these bits of teal that I had, laying out other low volume scraps. Could I put that there? Some of the jelly roll strips, just sort of trying all sorts of things, and then slowly putting sections together. So this is a kind of a fun part. If you find this fun, some people would find it frustrating, but I found it really fun. And so then eventually you'll end up with a few sections. So there's my top section all the way across. And then I'm kind of still working on this middle one at this point. But I've kind of got different units that are coming together. Now I was aiming for a throw size, but a throw size can be a lot of different measurements, but I was roughly looking for that sort of 50 to 60 inch kind of a quilt. So yeah, it's best if you have kind of the idea of what size you want it to be, so that you know when you're finished with your jigsaw, as it were. And so then again, so this is it in, I think, 2 sections. Yeah, so I've pieced the bottom all together, and then there's the top section still to add, and that's the quilt top all finished and together. So I have another video about how I pieced some batting for this quilt. So it's kind of a Franken batting deal. And then I quilted it with straight lines going in a variety of different directions. I'll show you on the back how that looks in a minute. But basically it was, I just used the guide on my presser foot to separate the lines, and then just turned them at a random place and went in the other direction, so that I got a kind of geometric effect on the back. I'll show you some more photos of that. And this is it finished. So I used a scrappy low volume binding, so some leftover jelly roll strips that were sort of coordinated, and then some of the scraps that I'd trimmed in the process of making it. So there's the back again. You can see I've kind of just decided on a place to turn, and I did the label in fleece. The backing I did in fleece as well, and I do have another video if you've not used fleece as backing. I happen to have a remnant that was the right size for this improv quilt, so it was perfect, and obviously the color was perfect, so I went ahead and used that. I hope you enjoyed that, and that it's given you some inspiration to just crack on and make your own modern improv scrappy quilt. I had loads of fun making this one, and it always seems to be that the ones that are simplest to put together turn out the best, and the ones that I labor over I'm never quite sure about. So give yourself permission to do something a bit more simple and a bit more just kind of free flow, and see where you get with it, and you might be surprised. If you like videos like this, then do please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, leave me a comment, let me know if you're going to try it, or if you've done one like this before, or if there's any videos that you'd like to see from me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, thanks for spending time with me.